The mariachi guitar melody from Emma Rodriguez's phone cut through the sterile silence of Atlanta General Hospital's waiting room. She pressed pause and slipped the device into her pocket, her fingers brushing against the worn leather of her bolsita sagrada, the sacred pouch that had belonged to Curandera Maria, her great-grandmother. 22 years old, with her black hair pulled back in a neat bun and her best interview suit pressed to perfection, Emma looked like any other medical school graduate. But the 4.0 GPA on her transcripts told only half her story. Dr. Harrison Wells emerged from the conference room, his silver hair gleaming under the fluorescent lights. He held her CV between two fingers as if it might contaminate him. His pale blue eyes scanned the document with the practiced indifference of someone who had already made his decision. "Ms. Rodriguez," he said, his voice carrying the authority of 30 years in academic medicine, "your 4.0 GPA is impressive, certainly, but we need physicians who embrace evidence-based medicine, not—" He paused, letting the silence hang between them like a blade. "Folk remedies." The CV fluttered to the reception desk. "Perhaps you'd be better suited for community health work, something more appropriate to your background." Emma's hand instinctively found the obsidian stone within her pouch. The volcanic glass, black as midnight and smooth as water, had traveled from the ancient pyramids of Teotihuacan to this moment. As her fingers wrapped around it, she heard Curandera Maria's voice, soft as a prayer. "Mija, la verdadera curación viene del corazón, no de los títulos en la pared." True healing comes from the heart, not from degrees on the wall. Dr. Wells was already turning away when his secretary called out cheerfully, "Dr. Wells, Brad Hoffman is here for his interview." Emma watched as a young white man with a 3.4 GPA, she'd seen the applications, walked confidently into the office that should have been hers. The drive home took Emma through the heart of Buford Highway, Atlanta's international corridor, where the scent of mole poblano mixed with exhaust fumes and dreams deferred. Norteño music spilled from Mercado San Miguel, while colorful murales of Frida Kahlo watched over the bustling street like protective spirits. But even here, in her own neighborhood, the divisions were visible. English-only signs hung in some shop windows, and Emma had learned to recognize the quick averting of eyes, the subtle shift in body language when certain customers realized she belonged to this world of accented voices and unfamiliar spices. Her mother Rosa was waiting in their small apartment above the Panaderia, still wearing her scrubs from the emergency room at Grady Hospital. 25 years of nursing had taught her to read faces, and Emma's expression told the whole story. "Mija," Rosa said softly, pulling Emma into an embrace that smelled of antiseptic and strength. "What happened?" Emma sank into the worn sofa, surrounded by the familiar comfort of home. The altar to the Virgen de Guadalupe glowed softly in the corner, candles flickering beside faded photographs of 4 generations of healing women. Curandera Maria's portrait sat at the center, her dark eyes seeming to hold secrets that medical textbooks would never contain. "He said my background wasn't appropriate for evidence-based medicine," Emma whispered, the words tasting bitter. "Like everything you taught me, everything Bisabuela taught you is just superstition." Rosa's jaw tightened. At the hospital, she had watched colleagues dismiss the herbal knowledge passed down through her family as cultural nonsense, until the night it saved a child's life when conventional treatments had failed. She had learned to practice her ancestral wisdom in silence, sharing it only with patients who understood. Emma reached for the Libro de Remedios, Curandera Maria's handwritten journal that chronicled centuries of healing knowledge. The leather cover was soft with age, the pages filled with remedies written in Spanish, sketches of healing herbs, and wisdom that had kept their people alive through conquest, displacement, and discrimination. But Emma was different from the women who came before her. She had been born with El Don, the gift of seeing beyond the physical body to the energy that flows through all living things. Where others saw symptoms, she saw patterns of light and shadow, the body's own language of illness and healing. Each evening, as Radio Fiesta 1090 played Selena's Como na Flor in the background, Emma would light candles to her ancestors and open the sacred book. Tonight, as her fingers traced the familiar pages, she felt the obsidian stone pulse with warmth against her palm. The television droned in the background, local news filling the silence. Billionaire industrialist Richard Blackwood remains paralyzed following a suspicious accident 3 years ago. The steel magnate has spent millions seeking treatment. Emma looked up at the screen, and for a moment her dawn flickered to life. Something was wrong with the man in the wheelchair, something the cameras couldn't capture, but her gift could sense. Something that called to the healer in her blood. The rejection letter arrived 3 days later. Crisp hospital letterhead delivering the final blow. Emma had been removed from the Advanced Clinical Rotations program, not for poor performance, but for what Dr. Wells termed concerning reliance on non-scientific approaches that could endanger patient safety. The incident that sealed her fate had been simple enough. Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman suffering from severe anxiety before surgery, had been spiraling into panic despite 2 rounds of Ativan. Emma had quietly suggested té de manzanilla, chamomile tea, a gentle remedy her grandmother had used for generations. The tea had worked. Mrs. Patterson's breathing slowed, her hands stopped shaking, and she went into surgery calm and prepared. But Dr. Wells had witnessed the exchange and saw only insubordination. Las manos que curan no necesitan títulos, pero el mundo ciego necesita pruebas, Emma read aloud from her great-grandmother's journal that night. The hands that heal need no degrees, but the blind world needs proof. Rosa found her daughter sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by medical textbooks and the ancient wisdom of the Libro de Remedios. The contrast was stark, glossy pages filled with pharmaceutical formulas next to hand-drawn illustrations of healing herbs. En el hospital, Rosa said quietly, settling beside her daughter, they called my herbal knowledge superstition until it saved that little boy's life. His fever wouldn't break for 3 days. The doctors were talking about brain damage. She touched Emma's hand. But willow bark tea and cool compresses where modern medicine failed. That child graduated high school last month. The memory was both comfort and frustration. Emma had grown up straddling 2 worlds, the sterile halls of modern medicine and the candlelit wisdom of her ancestors. She spoke the language of both, understood the science behind the ancient remedies, could explain why manzanilla worked just as well as benzodiazepines for mild anxiety. But the medical establishment saw only one world as legitimate. Her phone buzzed with a text from Dr. James Park, a Korean-American resident who had become an unexpected friend. My Halabeji's acupuncture saved my grandmother when Western medicine failed, he had confided once. I understand the struggle. Emma picked up the obsidian stone, its surface smooth and cool against her fevered thoughts. As she held it, a memory surfaced. Curandera Maria standing over a man who couldn't walk, her weathered hands moving in patterns older than written history. She had combined traditional sobederas massage with herbal remedies and what she called spirit healing. The man had walked again. Emma's eyes drifted to her laptop, where Richard Blackwood's face stared back at her from a news website. Something nagged at her, a whisper from her gun that his paralysis wasn't what it seemed. She pulled up his medical records from public filings related to insurance claims. The MRIs showed intact nerve pathways. The spinal imaging revealed no permanent damage. Yet he remained wheelchair-bound 3 years after an accident that should have healed. Emma closed her eyes and felt the stone pulse against her palm. Perhaps the blind world wasn't ready for proof. But maybe one broken billionaire was. The TikTok video went viral in 6 hours. Mexican girl claims she can heal paralyzed billionaire with brujeria, read the caption under shaky phone footage of Emma being escorted from Piedmont Hospital by security. 500,000 views. Comments ranging from laughing emojis to outright venom. Emma had tried the direct approach, arriving at Richard Blackwood's private wing with her medical school ID and a carefully prepared explanation of her diagnostic observations. She never made it past the lobby. Another charity case looking for attention, the security guard had said loudly enough for other visitors to hear. The phone cameras started recording immediately. Now she sat in her bedroom, watching her humiliation replay across social media while her mother fielded angry calls from extended family. Some relatives were furious that Emma had made the community look foolish. Others worried she would lose her scholarship, destroying the family's one chance at legitimacy in American medicine. ¿Qué estás haciendo, mija? Rosa asked, appearing in the doorway with worried eyes. Dr. Rodriguez at the clinic called. He's concerned about your reputation. The weight of disappointing everyone pressed down on Emma's chest. She had always been the family's hope, the first to attend medical school, the bridge between their ancestral wisdom and modern acceptance. Now she was becoming their embarrassment. Her phone rang, interrupting her spiral of self-doubt. Unknown number. Ms. Rodriguez, this is Dr. Sarah Chen from Emory Neurology. The voice was crisp, professional, but something underneath suggested urgency. I need to speak with you. It's about Richard Blackwood. They met at a coffee shop in Little Five Points, away from the medical establishment's watchful eyes. Dr. Chen was younger than Emma had expected, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and the slightly disheveled look of someone who spent too many hours analyzing brain scans. I've been following your case, Dr. Chen said, sliding a manila folder across the small table. Your diagnostic instincts about Blackwood, they're not wrong. Emma opened the folder to find Richard's actual medical files, not the sanitized versions released to insurance companies. MRIs, CT scans, nerve conduction studies, all showing a man who should be walking. I learned traditional Chinese medicine from my grandmother before I became a neurologist, Dr. Chen continued, her voice lowered. I know how to see what Western medicine misses. Your dawn, your gift, it's real, and it's seeing something the rest of us have overlooked. But if his nerves are intact, Emma began, then his paralysis isn't physical. It's conversion disorder, psychological trauma manifesting as physical symptoms, the mind imprisoning the body. Dr. Chen leaned forward. I can't treat it because the family won't acknowledge psychological causes. Too much stigma for a man like Blackwood. Emma felt the obsidian stone warm against her chest. In the Libro de Remedios, Curandera Maria had written about such cases, souls so wounded they forgot how to inhabit their bodies completely. There's something else, Dr. Chen said, producing a business card. Margaret Blackwood, Richard's sister, has been asking questions about alternative treatments. She might be willing to listen. The card bore an elegant script and a Buckhead address. Emma touched the stone and heard her great-grandmother's voice. Mi nieta querida, el mundo te dirá que no eres suficiente. No los escuches. Tu don es un regalo de los ancestros. The world will tell you that you are not enough. Don't listen to them. Your gift is a present from the ancestors. Margaret Blackwood's Buckhead mansion stood like a monument to old Atlanta money. But the woman who answered the door looked nothing like the society pages suggested. Her silver hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her clothes understated, and her eyes held the particular exhaustion that comes from watching someone you love suffer without being able to help. Miss Rodriguez, she said, stepping aside to let Emma enter. Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would, after everything. The foyer was elegant but warm, filled with art that spoke of travels to places where healing took many forms. Emma noticed a small altar in an alcove, not Catholic like her family's, but clearly spiritual. Crystals, sage, a small Buddha statue beside what looked like Cherokee pottery. "I've been researching alternative treatments for 3 years," Margaret said, leading Emma to a sunlit sitting room. "Richard won't hear of it, of course. Too proud, too convinced that if money can't fix it, nothing can." "Dr. Chen said his paralysis might be psychological," Emma ventured carefully. Margaret's laugh was bitter. Psychological. As if trauma isn't real. As if guilt can't be as crippling as any physical injury. She moved to the window, gazing out at gardens that were clearly her refuge. "Did you know he was supposed to attend a worker safety meeting the day of his accident? Instead, he went golfing. While he was on the 7th hole, an explosion at one of his factories killed 6 men. The pieces began forming a pattern in Emma's mind. He blames himself. The family sued, of course. Richard settled for millions, but money doesn't resurrect the dead. Margaret turned back to Emma. The accident happened exactly 24 hours after he learned about the explosion. His car went off the road on a perfectly clear day. No other vehicles involved. Emma felt her dawn stirring, the familiar sensation of seeing beyond the obvious. He punished himself. And now he's trapped in that wheelchair, spending fortunes on treatments that can't heal a wounded soul. Margaret's voice carried the weight of watching helplessly from the sidelines. I heard about the International Medical Innovation Summit next month. Atlanta's hosting discussions about integrating traditional healing with modern medicine. Emma's heart jumped. She'd read about the summit, but never imagined she could participate. I'm just a medical student who got kicked out of rotations. You're a healer, Margaret said firmly. I've done my research on your family, Miss Rodriguez. 4 generations of curanderas. Your great-grandmother was legendary in this city's Mexican community. People still talk about the miracles she performed. She handed an office-looking envelope. I've submitted your name for a presentation slot. The theme is Bridging Ancient Wisdom and Modern Science. Richard will be there as a keynote speaker and as the event's primary financial backer. Emma's fingers trembled as she opened the acceptance letter. Her mind raced with possibilities and terror in equal measure. To present her family's knowledge on such a stage, to risk everything on one chance to prove that traditional medicine deserved respect? If I fail publicly, then you fail honestly, using the gifts your ancestors gave you. Margaret's smile was sad but determined. Richard needs healing that money can't buy. And maybe, just maybe, you need a platform that prejudice can't deny. Emma touched the obsidian stone through her shirt and felt Curandera Varia's presence like a warm embrace. The summit was 3 weeks away. The Georgia World Congress Center buzzed with the energy of 500 medical professionals from around the globe. Emma stood at the edge of the main conference hall wearing her great-grandmother's rebozo over a crisp white blouse, the Libro de Remedios clutched against her chest like armor. She was 22 years old, a medical student without hospital privileges, about to address some of the most prestigious names in medicine. Her hand shook as she watched Dr. Patricia Williams from Johns Hopkins take the podium for the opening keynote. Evidence-based medicine has brought us to the pinnacle of human healing, Dr. Williams declared, her voice carrying across the vast space. We must be vigilant against the creep of unproven methodologies that could undermine decades of scientific progress. The applause was thunderous. Emma felt every clap like a physical blow. Dr. James Park appeared at her elbow, offering quiet support. My grandmother always said the loudest voices are often the most afraid, he whispered. Dr. Williams lost a patient to a misdiagnosis last year. She's feeling defensive. Across the hall, Emma spotted Richard Blackwood in his custom wheelchair, surrounded by assistants and security. Even from a distance, her picked up the energy around him, not the defeated aura of true paralysis, but something more complex. Guilt wrapped around his spine like chains, shame pooling in his lower chakras, fear pulsing through his nervous system. Ms. Rodriguez, Dr. Elena Vasquez, the conference organizer, appeared with a warm smile. "We've moved your presentation to the main stage. There's been considerable interest." Emma's stomach dropped. She had prepared for a small breakout session, maybe 30 attendees curious about traditional medicine. The main stage meant hundreds of doctors, live streaming, media coverage. "I can't," she whispered. Dr. Vasquez studied her with the knowing eyes of someone who had fought similar battles. "I'm Cuban American. My abuela was a santera who could heal with herbs and prayers. When I started medical school, I hid that part of myself, denied my heritage to fit into their world." She gestured toward the sea of white coats and expensive suits. "But hiding our gifts doesn't make them disappear. It just makes us smaller." Emma watched Dr. Jonathan Sterling from Harvard take the microphone next, his presentation titled "The Dangers of Pseudoscience in Modern Healthcare." His slides showed examples of harmful traditional practices, cherry-picked cases stripped of cultural context, presented as evidence that ancient wisdom was primitive superstition. Her anger flared hot and clean. These were her people's healing methods being mocked, her great-grandmother's legacy dismissed as quackery. "Mija," she whispered to herself, touching the obsidian stone, "la verdadera curación viene del corazón." She opened the Libro de Remedios to a page about treating wounded spirits, about healing trauma that lived in the body's memory. Curandera Maria's handwriting seemed to pulse with life. When the mind creates prison for the body, only the soul holds the key. Richard Blackwood was more than a medical mystery. He was proof that some wounds needed more than pharmaceuticals to heal. Emma straightened her rebozo and walked toward the stage. "I'm ready." The auditorium fell silent as Emma approached the podium. 500 pairs of eyes tracked her movement, some curious, others skeptical, a few openly hostile. The massive screens flanking the stage displayed her presentation title, Soul Medicine, Integrating Traditional Mexican Healing with Modern Neuropsychology. Dr. Harrison Wells sat in the front row, his arms crossed and jaw set. Behind him, a sea of white faces in white coats waited for her to fail. "My great-grandmother, Curandera Maria Rodriguez, never went to medical school," Emma began, her voice steadying as she found her rhythm. "But she understood something that our modern medicine has forgotten, that the body remembers every trauma, every wound, every moment when the spirit breaks." She clicked to her first slide, a photograph of Curandera Maria's weathered hands holding medicinal herbs alongside a brain scan showing trauma patterns in the limbic system. "In my family's tradition, we have a term, parálisis del alma, paralysis of the soul, when guilt or trauma becomes so overwhelming that the mind literally shuts down the body's ability to function." Murmurs rippled through the audience. Dr. Sterling leaned forward, his expression shifting from dismissive to intrigued. "This isn't mysticism," Emma continued, gaining confidence. "It's what modern medicine calls conversion disorder, somatization, psychosomatic illness. The difference is, my ancestors developed treatments for it 800 years ago." She opened the Libro de Remedios on the podium, its ancient pages visible to the cameras broadcasting live. Traditional Mexican healing recognizes 5 levels of trauma response: physical, emotional, energetic, spiritual, and ancestral. Western medicine typically addresses only the first 2. Dr. Williams stood abruptly. "Miss Rodriguez, you're asking us to integrate unproven spiritual concepts into evidence-based practice. How do we maintain scientific rigor when treating imaginary energy fields?" The challenge hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown.
Emma felt the obsidian stone warm against her chest, felt Curandera Maria's presence surrounding her like protective light. "I'd like to invite Mr. Richard Blackwood to the stage," Emma said quietly. The auditorium erupted. Security moved forward, but Richard raised a hand to stop them. For a long moment, he stared at Emma across the vast space. Then, slowly, he rolled his wheelchair toward the stage ramp. "Mr. Blackwood," Emma said as he positioned himself beside her, "would you describe your accident for the audience?" Richard's voice was steady but hollow. "3 years ago, my car went off the road. The impact damaged my spinal cord. I've been paralyzed from the waist down ever since." Emma nodded respectfully, then turned to address the audience. "With Mr. Blackwood's permission, I'd like to share what traditional diagnosis reveals about his condition." She held up a tablet displaying his medical scans. MRI shows intact nerve pathways. CT scans reveal no permanent spinal damage. Nerve conduction studies indicate full functionality. The audience grew restless. Dr. Wells looked furious. "The medical mystery isn't why Mr. Blackwood can't walk," Emma said, her voice carrying clearly through the sound system. "It's why he won't let himself heal." Richard's hands gripped his wheelchair armrests so tightly his knuckles turned white. The silence stretched like a taut wire about to snap. Richard Blackwood's face had gone pale, his breathing shallow and rapid. In the front row, Dr. Wells was on his feet, outrage radiating from every line of his body. "This is unconscionable," he shouted. "You're exploiting a vulnerable patient with pseudo-scientific nonsense." But Richard raised a trembling hand. "Let her continue." Emma's eyes flared to life, showing her the energy patterns around Richard's body. Darkness pooled around his heart. Grief wrapped around his spine like barbed wire. Shame bleeding into his legs like poison. She had seen this pattern before, in Curandera Maria's notes about soldiers who returned from war unable to walk despite having functional limbs. "Mr. Blackwood," Emma said gently, kneeling beside his wheelchair, "your body isn't broken, your spirit is." She reached into her bolsita sagrada and withdrew the obsidian stone, its black surface catching the stage lights. "In my tradition, obsidian is used for limpias, cleansing ceremonies that release trapped trauma." "This is not appropriate for a medical conference," Dr. Williams protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Something in Richard's demeanor had shifted, a crack appearing in the wall he'd built around his guilt. Emma ignored the protests and placed her hands gently on Richard's knees. Through her gift, she could feel the energy blockages, the places where his nervous system had shut down, not from physical damage, but from emotional overwhelm. "Tell them about the explosion," she whispered. Richard's voice broke. 6 men died in my factory while I was playing golf. I knew the safety protocols were inadequate. I knew the equipment needed replacement. But the quarterly reports looked good, so I went golfing instead of attending the safety meeting. The auditorium was so quiet that the hum of the air conditioning sounded like thunder. "I was standing on the 7th tee when my assistant called," Richard continued, tears streaming down his face. 6 families destroyed because I chose profit over people. I see their faces every night, their children at the funerals I wasn't brave enough to attend." Emma began a soft chant in Nahuatl, the language of her ancestors, while her hands moved in patterns Curandera Maria had taught her grandmother, who had taught her mother, who had taught her. She burned dried sage, the smoke curling around them both. "Forgiveness doesn't erase the past," Emma said, her voice carrying the authority of generations. As she worked, something extraordinary happened. Richard's legs began to respond, not to medical intervention, but to the release of guilt he'd carried for 3 years. Muscle memory awakened as emotional chains loosened. "I can feel," he whispered, staring down at his legs in wonder. "Stand up," Emma commanded, her voice infused with the power of ancestral wisdom. And Richard Blackwood, billionaire industrialist who had spent millions seeking a cure for his guilt, slowly rose from his wheelchair and stood. The auditorium exploded into chaos, some applauding, others shouting protests, cameras flashing like lightning. But Emma heard only Curandera Maria's voice, soft as prayer. "Así es como sanamos, mija, con amor, no con medicina." This is how we heal, daughter, with love, not medicine.
2 years later, Emma Rodriguez stood in the lobby of the newly opened Curandera Maria Integrative Healing Institute, watching morning sunlight stream through windows that faced both the gleaming towers of downtown Atlanta and the colorful murals of Buford Highway. The Libro de Remedios sat in a place of honor behind glass, its ancient pages open to reveal hand-drawn illustrations of healing herbs alongside their modern scientific names. Beside it, the obsidian stone rested on a velvet cushion, still warm with the touch of countless hands seeking healing. "Dr. Rodriguez?" A young Latina woman in scrubs approached nervously. "I'm Maria Santos, the new nursing student. Dr. Wells said you wanted to meet me?" Emma smiled, remembering her own terror at that age. The young woman carried herself with the particular tension of someone trying to prove she belonged in spaces that had never welcomed people like her. "Siéntate, mija," Emma said, gesturing to chairs by the meditation fountain. "Tell me about your family." As Maria spoke about her grandmother's gift for healing with herbs, Emma reached into her pocket and withdrew a small obsidian stone, one of many she'd had carved from the original. When Maria finished her story, Emma placed it in her palm. "This will remind you that healing comes from within," Emma said, repeating Curandera Maria's words. "Your ancestors' wisdom isn't superstition, it's medicine the world forgot it needed." Through the window, she could see Richard Blackwood crossing the courtyard toward the memorial garden he'd funded. 6 trees planted in honor of the men who died, their families now recipients of scholarships that would educate a generation of safety engineers. His walk was strong and sure, but more importantly, his spirit had healed. Dr. Harrison Wells appeared in the doorway, no longer the arrogant department head who had dismissed her dreams. His transformation had been as profound as Richard's. Humbled by witnessing healing he couldn't explain, he now co-directed the Institute's Cultural Competency Program. "Emma," he said, using her first name with hard-earned respect, "the delegation from WHO is here for the site visit. They're considering our model for global implementation." The World Health Organization had come to study what media had dubbed the Atlanta Miracle, a healthcare model that seamlessly integrated traditional healing practices with modern medicine. Conversion disorder cases that had puzzled neurologists for decades were being successfully treated using protocols Emma developed from Curandera Maria's teachings. But the real miracle wasn't the medical breakthroughs. It was the change in how healing was understood. Across 15 states, hospitals now employed traditional healers alongside conventional doctors. Medical schools taught courses in cultural medicine. The faces of healthcare had begun to reflect the communities they served. Emma's phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Saw you on CNN again, mija. Bisabuela would be so proud." Rosa now served as head nurse at the Institute, her decades of hidden herbal knowledge finally recognized and celebrated. The family's tradition of healing would continue, but no longer in shadow. That evening, Emma opened a new Libro de Remedios, this one written in both Spanish and English, combining ancestral wisdom with modern research. The obsidian stone sat beside her laptop as she typed, its presence a reminder that some truths transcend time and culture. She began to write. Chapter 1, When the Heart Remembers How to Heal. Outside her window, the city pulsed with life, a place where ancient wisdom and modern medicine had learned to dance together, where healing knew no boundaries of race or class or creed. The future belonged to all of them now.